Hi everyone, this is Dr. Zachary Leong. In today's lecture, we'll be talking about revenue management. But before getting into the lecture, let's first take a step back to remind ourselves how this lecture fits in to the lectures 7 to 9. So lectures 7 to 9 are about the topic of how to match supply with demand. In Lecture 7, we looked at managing service capacity. In Lecture 8, we looked at managing inventory levels. And in today's lecture, we'll be looking at how to manage the customer arrivals, especially by manipulating the prices and managing the product availability. All right, so that's what revenue management is about in a nutshell. And we'll be covering 3 topics in today's lecture: demand forecasting, the 4 core concepts of revenue management, and overselling. Alright, so let's get down to the definition first. What is revenue management? According to the Revenue Management book by Robert Cross, revenue management is the application of disciplined analytics that predicts consumer behavior at the micro-market levels and optimize product availability and price to maximize revenue growth. The primary aim of revenue management is selling the right product to the right customer at the right time, for the right price, and with the right pack. The essence of this discipline is understanding customers' perception of product value and accurately aligning product prices, placements, and availability with each product segment. Alright, that's quite wordy, so let me try to summarize it as follows. The goal of revenue management is to maximize the revenue and or the profit by, firstly, predicting the customer behavior at the micro-market level, which means either customer segments or even at the individual level, and based on that knowledge, optimizing the product availability and product pricing. Okay, so before explaining what revenue management is and giving more examples, let's first go through a brief history of revenue management. And revenue management was pioneered by American Airlines. So in the 1980s, American Airlines was facing stiff competition. So the context is the 1978 Airline Deregulation Act in the United States, which led to a huge increase in airline companies, a huge increase in the number of flights, and a huge decrease in the prices of flights. And when that happened, American Airlines was facing stiff competition from a new startup called People Express. American Airlines was a so-called legacy carrier, somewhat similar to Cathay Pacific in Hong Kong, whereas People Express was a low-cost carrier similar to Hong Kong Express, which is obviously from Hong Kong. So because of their legacy status, they had very high costs and high prices compared to People Express, which had much lower costs and lower prices as well. Although American Airlines had the advantage of an advanced IT system which they had built up over the years, whereas People Express as a startup did not think it was important to invest in an advanced IT system. So People Express was growing rapidly and stealing market share from American Airlines. And as I mentioned earlier, the root cause was that American Airlines was in a weak competitive position due to its higher costs and higher prices. So how could American Airlines compete effectively with a lower cost competitor? Let's take a short detour to discuss the fixed costs versus the marginal costs for operating a flight. So the fixed costs are called fixed costs because they are independent of how many passengers are actually on the flight. So this includes the cost of owning the plane, maintaining it, and of operating it. It includes things like airport fees and government taxes, includes salaries of pilots and flight attendants. So whether the flight is completely empty or completely full, you have to pay these costs regardless. The marginal costs are dependent on how many passengers are actually flying on the flight. And for example, fuel. So if you have more passengers, the flight is heavier and you have to pay more fuel costs. And if you have more passengers, you have to serve them more meals and snacks and drinks. The key insight is that the marginal costs are much lower in general than the ticket prices, and also the marginal costs are almost zero if the flight has many empty seats. So how American Airlines fought back against People Express was they used this principle. So for flights with many empty seats, the marginal costs are near zero, so every seat you can sell, every empty seat that you can fill is basically pure profit. So American Airlines won by offering lower prices on those flights with many empty seats. So first they had to be able to forecast demand to know which flights would have how many empty seats, and they launched these so-called ultimate super saver fares, which were even cheaper than the People Express fares on the same routes. So by doing this, they could capture this demand that was otherwise going to People Express. So one question you might have is, how can you prevent those customers, those high-paying customers who were originally paying high prices on those to buy seats, how do you prevent these high-paying customers from buying those cheaper tickets that you're offering on the same routes? So to prevent these high-paying customers from buying these cheaper tickets, the Ultimate Super Saver fares had a bunch of restrictions which made them unattractive for the high-paying customers, such as advance purchase restrictions, meaning you have to buy the tickets, for example, 14 days in advance or more. These super cheap tickets were non-refundable and non-changeable, so you have no flexibility. Once you buy them, you use it or you lose it. And those tickets were also capacity controlled, which meant that if the flight was almost full, there's a limited number of these cheaper tickets, and if the flight sells out of those cheaper tickets, then that's it. No more cheaper tickets will be sold, even if there are many seats available on that flight still, because you're saving them for the high-paying customers that you hope will come. So when American Airlines implemented this, what they called a yield management system, but that's equivalent to revenue management, there was a huge impact on both American Airlines and their competitor. American Airlines saw a huge increase in revenue and profits, which led to much happiness and many bonuses for the people working there. Whereas People Express was not able to compete. They turned from being profitable to losing money, and eventually in 2 years or 3 years following the introduction of the yield management system, they declared bankruptcy and ceased operations. So more broadly, beyond American Airlines, the company itself, basically all airlines copied and adapted similar and implemented similar systems, and even today, revenue management is a crucial function in basically every airline company. And beyond the airline industry, other industries also saw American Airlines' success and decided to implement similar systems. So, for example, in the travel or hospitality sectors, things like hotels, cruises, car rentals, resorts implement similar revenue management and dynamic pricing strategies. The advertising industry, including TV and internet advertising, also charges different prices for different types of ads, different keywords, different customer types that they're showing the ads to, and so on. So companies such as UPS also, or DHL, FedEx, and so on, also charge different prices for delivering packages at different times depending on their capacity. So for example, around Christmas time, where there's a huge number of packages and mail that's being delivered, UPS might charge higher prices compared to times when there's other times of the year when there's much less mail and capacity is not so tight. Alright, so that's the end of the overview of this revenue management lecture. Hopefully this brief history lesson has got you excited and interested to learn more about how revenue management is done. Alright, see you in the next part.